Hello, everyone. It's Lizzie. I'm wondering how many of you saw my snafu this morning as I very early tried to send out our video invite reminder for today, and I sent it for 12 instead of for 11. So I'm thankful for those of you who have found us. Of course, the regular invite's been out for 11, and for 2 years of webinars, it's always been at 11. So I'm hoping certainly that all of our normal friends will find us at our regularly scheduled time for our regularly scheduled programming. I did not see it until far too late. Actually, I have to be honest, I did not see it until too late, but I'm hoping that everyone will still know where to find us. I know we still have a few more minutes. And thank you, Kat. Those are like mistakes that I don't like to make. I think those are, so Michelle, welcome. How are you? Glad to see that you are joining today. Always holidays and money go hand in hand. I think it's that undercurrent of the country. Everyone's starting to think about, oh, the money that comes with the holiday stress and how we get through all of that. I know that it's been a hot topic for a lot of people, and many of you have also met with or seen Leisa in some of our previous financial webinars. Feels like something we can't seem to get enough of, talking about money, our mindset around money. Just a reminder, we have just a couple of minutes. If you haven't yet downloaded the handout, there is a Key to Financial Happiness PDF that's attached to today's handout. We'll get through the initial material this morning, and you certainly don't have to have it printed, but if you want to be able to grab it, you can. Anyone on with us for the first time? See a few of you excited to be here. Thank you, Kristen. Glad to have you. We have an amazing speaker today, and if you are done and love Leisa the way that we will, there's some additional material at rate.com/grow where Leisa has spoke to us on other topics. So glad to have you. Tabitha, welcome. Quite a few new ones. Clarissa, Naeem, hopefully I got your name right. Jolene, good, lots of good first timers. And Darlene, we always have a kind of core group that joins us on these, but for those of you who haven't joined on the financial topics, they seem to be the ones where everyone's like, yes, me, please. Is there a magic wand, a magic pill here to figure out how to alleviate some of my stress for money? And I will tell you, it's not like magic in that it like just will happen. But Leisa always has really good tips about how we can get our heads kind of back and straight around money and our relationship to it. She certainly has taught me a bunch. So, oh, thank you. Allie is like, Lizzie, I love your sweater. Yes, it's very bright. You'll see Leisa momentarily, and Leisa was like, we're both right today. Lots of fun color. We're kind of sunny here in Chicago, but still getting a little cold. So thank you, Terry. Yes, bright is good. All right, well, we are just at the top of the hour, and I think no better introduction than to introduce herself. As I've said, we've had Leisa on a couple of times already. She is an author who has written The Mindful Millionaire. We've given away her books in the past. Certainly we'll make sure that you know where to find them, where you can find her book going forward, but I'll ask Leisa to come back and invite us. She's a certified financial planner, a money coach, an educator. We've so appreciated Lisa's kind of insight for us. Hello, Leisa, welcome. They get to hear from me all of the time, and they're ready to hear about, I've got lots of chats going, if we can figure out how to get my head straight through both the money and the holiday piece in the next few months, I'm happy to invest this hour. So I guess I'll let you take it from here.
Okay, and do I need to do anything? You're seeing my screen right now?
Yep, we can see you perfectly, and yep, you're I think good to go.
Awesome. Well, I'm so happy to be back. Thank you for joining us. It's an honor to speak with you. I'm here in sunny Arizona today, and my goal is to give you some ideas that can bring you more happiness into your financial life and far less stress. And like Lizzie said, the timing couldn't be better for entering the holiday period, because that can be a more stressful time for all of us. So before we get started, I wanted to recognize that this topic, financial anxiety, that is, can be very tough and personal. And for that reason, The most important thing to do, if that's the case for you, is to have some level of grace for yourself and to recognize that this is very much a part of being human. And I think for many people, a part of dealing with money. So what I want to always start with is a nice big breath. And I want to share a little bit about something that I think will bring this all into context. And what I wanted to do and what I wanted to prepare for you today was not just a talk, but actually a workshop where we can all do some thinking, have a breakthrough, walk away having better understanding about where we're at with financial anxiety, what we can do differently going forward. But if you start by taking a nice deep breath, I also wanted to say that we can change a lot of things that feel like they aren't, like maybe we've had financial anxiety for a really long time. And I want to invite you to the conversation thinking, hey, maybe this is that time. Maybe this is that time that something can change. Dealing, like I said, with financial anxiety is something that can change. And someone who experienced it for a really long time in my life, I don't feel it anymore. And it's probably because I focus so much on it. But a story that I want to share with you is that when I was in 7th grade, I found myself going from being one of the smartest kids in the classroom to really struggling with basic algebra. I could not get my head around the abstract concepts. And as a result of struggling, my teacher walked up to me one day and said that I was so bad at math, I probably should avoid it for the rest of my life. I don't know who would ever tell somebody that, but I kid you not, I believed him. And from that moment forward, for the next 10 years of my life, I did really bad in math in high school. I did well enough to get into college, thank goodness. I designed my own major to avoid taking any more math. And it wasn't until I decided to get my MBA that I was like, I have to actually figure out what this thing, math is all about. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do. So I hired a tutor. And the amazing thing is within a few weeks of working with the tutor and paying attention to like some things that I was having a hard time with, it turned out I was actually really, really good with math. And if I hadn't done that and I hadn't gotten my MBA, I would never have achieved the things that I have achieved in my lifetime, becoming a self-made millionaire. For many years, I was a mortgage banker, just like many of you. I ultimately wrote a book about money, and none of that would have happened. And the reason I share that with you is many times we have beliefs about the fact that this is going to be this way for us forever, and it's just not simply the case. And that's what I want to show you today. So if you're new to my work, I'll just share Leisa Peterson. I have been working in the money business for 30 years. I wrote a book called The Mindful Millionaire. I was also a mortgage banker with Wells Fargo Advisors from 2003 till 2010. And you might be like, boo, but I was really, really good at it and I loved it. And it was so fun when I got the opportunity to come and speak with all of you, because I'm such a fan of what you do and the possibilities and the opportunity to help people buy homes. And that's actually part of the reason too that my husband and I were able to build our wealth, is by me knowing the mortgage business so well. It helped me to buy property and start an Airbnb business, and the rest is history. But I wanted to just share that with you, because as we go into this conversation with financial anxiety, not only do I want you to take a nice deep breath, but I want to introduce you to how common it is, the fact that especially during these times, the stress level has gone up for most people, and it is something that you can do differently. I also want to say that during this conversation, probably everybody at some point or another has said to themselves, well, if I just had more money, then my financial anxiety would go away. And what I found is, granted, money is awesome, but the stuff that's going on underneath can actually stay there even if you have more money. And so this conversation today isn't just going to say, go make more money or spend less money, which are important. Those are things that I think happen when we feel less financial anxiety. And so that's what I want to get into. I want to help you understand how that works and how you can help yourself. So what we're going to do is just share a little bit about the statistics around financial anxiety. It is really, really common. There have been a lot of studies recently, particularly with the pandemic, talking about just how much stress people are undergoing around money. 69% of Americans feel they've shared that they have financial worries. Of the 69%, 25% say that they're really worried that they don't have enough money. And then sadly, people of color are disproportionately affected. A 2020 survey found that these numbers of 78% of Hispanic Americans, 76% of Black Americans experienced financial difficulties just in the last year compared to their white counterparts. So the point is that it is also something that women are affected more heavily than men in many cases. There isn't as much studies of this as I'd like, but I will say that because women did not have authority over their money until 40, 50 years ago, we have seen that women are still learning how to take on more authority. But what's sad is that women have a lot of responsibility. And so if there's a disconnect of how much authority you feel and the responsibility you feel, if your responsibility is really high and you don't feel like you have a lot of authority, that's going to show up in greater levels of anxiety. So I just want you to know you are not alone in your feelings. And so what we wanted to do is actually put a poll up to invite you to tune into where are you right now? Because I think, again, it helps to know you're not alone. And if we could see what is happening for the group, it will probably hit home even further.
Yeah, so everyone find Ella's launched it for us here. So are you someone who has kind of little or no to financial anxiety? And I think Leisa would say, like, that's her, right? She's kind of worked through and worked and focused on that. But are you someone, and I saw a couple of you chat in early, like, oh, this is the right time. The holiday especially makes my super strong feelings of anxiety around money even worse. So let's take just a couple here, a few of you who are saying, like, I need to find a number 10. No, 5 is the most. 5 is I get it as much as anyone. I feel like I luckily, Leisa, I feel like after working with you, get to make mine a little more moderate or a little fairer to moderate, where I think I would have used to have been closer to a 4 or a 5. I did used to also, by the way, think it was just about the money. I thought that was the part. I thought it was just the money piece. All right, just another couple seconds here. Go ahead, Leisa, sorry.
There was a book written that inspired me many years ago when I was writing my book called It's Not About the Money. And it was talking about this sort of thing, that we think it's only the money. And then we get into it, we start realizing how much conditioning we have around these things like financial anxiety. We realize that there's more to the eye there's more to the problem than meets the eye.
Absolutely. All right, well, we'll close it. There's the last one getting the answer there. Let's see. Oh, kind of in the middle. 4 is highest, but 3 is right there. So I think, but we certainly have a big chunk of us. Leisa, you might have been one of the few that was there on number 1, but it looks like between moderate and strong, we all have a lot of good company.
Okay, so that, I mean, it does help to know you're not alone with this. And what we're going to do is we're going to focus on 3 areas that I think can make the biggest shift for you, depending on, wherever you're at. If you're feeling a lot, I'd like to see a lot of shift. If you're only feeling a little bit of anxiety, then maybe the shift won't be quite as big for you. But I'm going to give you some tools, and that also is included on the flyer, some tools that are going to help you dive into this. So we're going to talk about your feelings and how important those are. We're going to talk about when we go into our heads and we really struggle with like what to do and how to solve the problem, and some things that can help you keep moving beyond resistance. And then finally, what can you do differently, and what are some approaches that you can take? And to start that, my screen is a little bit slow right now. So what I will say is when you, okay, do you see my screen, or it's just,
we
okay.
can see poll. Can you go?
There we go. It worked.
It went forward just one more even than your 3 columns, but
Thank you. Okay, so these 3 areas, what I have found is financial anxiety happens for us when we're feeling one thing, thinking about something else, and doing something completely different. And what that means is that when we don't have congruency in what's happening with us and our money and thinking, feeling, doing, we find ourselves stressed, period. But when we can bring more alignment into these 3 areas, which we'll dive into, everything changes. So my mouse is super sensitive. Sorry, folks. So we're going to go into the feeling first, okay? And I found that what probably hits home the most is when we can just follow a story through this so you can see how this plays out with one of my clients. So originally, Rhonda came to me because she was worried all the time about money, even though she had a good job and she could pay her bills when they came due. And that was really confusing to her because she's like, I don't know why I'm worried about money all the time. And we had to dig in deeper to figure out why. And so what we're going to do here is we're actually going to take a moment to take a nice big deep breath. And I'm going to invite you to think about what is your biggest source of financial anxiety. And as you think about that, you might notice that it feels a certain way in your body. It's okay, you're safe here. I just want you to know we're just doing this to show you how this is going to help you going forward. But it might be that you don't feel secure with your finances. It might be that you're not on the same page with a partner. It could be, especially here in the industry that you're in, there's a lot of variable income and bonus commission, right? So dealing with the stress of variable income, large unexpected expenses, uncertainty. And then for some of us, money, if we don't have as much money as we'd like, it weighs on us and it makes us feel like we're not worthy of something, like it affects our self-worth. So I'm just going to invite you to notice, what is the biggest source of financial anxiety for you? And again, taking in a nice big deep breath. And once you've pinpointed that, you might even want to write it down because this is really helpful. But what I want you to do next is I want you to think for a moment, how do you treat yourself around this topic? And you might even be surprised, like, wow, is that the thing that I'm stressed about? I didn't realize that. But now you're turning inwards and you're saying, how do I treat myself when this particular anxiety comes up? Nice big deep breath. Next, I want you to also think about, how do you treat others when you get activated about this topic? So how do you treat yourself? Maybe there's a really tough inner critic inside that gives you a hard time. Or how do you treat others? Maybe you get angry, or maybe you don't want to talk about it, which is kind of, like we run away from it. Maybe it causes certain things to happen in your life. Maybe you give up on things that are really important to you because of the anxiety. It just makes you not even want to try. So I'm just inviting you to notice how you treat yourself around this topic, how you treat others, and also notice how it feels in your body. Is it in your head? Do you feel a headache coming on because you thought about that? Is it in your heart? It gets tight. Or maybe it's in your gut and you just feel this like sinking feeling. Just notice that tendency. Another big, nice, deep breath, maybe a drink of water. Because remember, this is about being really compassionate to yourself. You might be seeing something that you've been avoiding seeing for a long time. And this is so important because what we're trying to do is we're trying to understand what's happening inside of us. Nobody gave us a user manual when we were born. So here we're learning about ourselves. And so next up, I want you to ask yourself some questions. You know, if anything were possible, what would I like to welcome into my life around this topic? So if anything was possible, what would you like to welcome into your life? Nice big deep breath. And adding to that, you can ask yourself, when I am at my best, who am I? And this version, this best version of you, what does she want to flow more energy towards around this topic? Like, what is your highest version of you want to do around this feeling? And then the next question is, what's preventing you from doing that now? Is anything standing in the way? And maybe write a note about that, because that might be something that you want to explore further. But for many of us, there's a lot of psyche stuff going on, a lot of emotional stuff going on. And so I'm going to invite you to notice if there's something that you're ready to let go of. Maybe it's a belief. Maybe it's a story. Maybe it's some trauma from when you were really young. Like, is there something that you're ready to let go of? I forgot to mention this earlier, but you know, numbers are just numbers for most of us. But the minute we put a dollar sign in front of the number, it becomes very emotional. And the more that you can let go of the things that you're holding on to that cause you to feel bad, the easier this process is going to be. Okay. So back to Rhonda, and you can see if this kind of resonates with what's going on for you. But when she did these sorts of exercises, she realized that the source of the financial anxiety that was happening for her was because she and her partner were not on the same page about money. And that can cause a lot of stress, right? If you want to do one thing and they want to do another, and then you can never talk about it because it leads to a fight, then that's gonna probably make you feel like there's no hope, and then you don't want to focus on it. But just by knowing that that was the source of the stress, it caused her to feel more peace of mind. It didn't solve the problem, but it caused her to be like, okay, that's what I'm dealing with. Now at least I know what I've got to work with. And many times in our lives, we will not feel things because we're so afraid of how they're going to feel in our body, how distracting they're going to become, that we actually never take the time to do what we just did. So I just want to congratulate you for even being willing to look at something that maybe you didn't want to before. But the cool thing is now you know what you've got to work with. Okay, and that's really, really powerful, because knowing what you feel, knowing what's happening under the surface is the first thing that I want you to take away from this conversation. It helps you understand where the anxiety is coming from, and you can't change it if you don't know that. Okay, and it still might be like, I just need more money. That's fine. But that's also going to be really important for you to notice that this is the thing that you're going to want to be doing research about, you know, as we go forward. Okay, so number 2, I mentioned, you know, financial anxiety happens when we're feeling one way, thinking about something else, and doing something completely different. So here we're diving into thinking. And, you know, when we're oftentimes, just like in the case of Rhonda, we're like, you know, the first thing she probably did when she realized that it was all about this discussion with her partner was she went into her head, right? And she's like, okay, well, I definitely know that I want to change this situation. And she goes into her head, and then immediately it's like she can spiral quickly because she's like, well, the last time we had this conversation, we got in a fight. And he really doesn't want to have this conversation because his family is so bad with money. It just brings up all this stuff from the past. And before she knows it, she's lost in her head trying to figure out how to solve something and then ending up back where she started, just hitting this you know, what I'm going to call is resistance. It's like we take on too much. We're like, I need to fix that problem right now, and if I don't fix it, then it's not going to go away. And what I want to talk about today is what's happening for us is us going into our heads and trying to solve the problems really quickly once we know what it is normally doesn't work. And the reason for that is when we try to move towards change in life as human beings, there's a super strong chance that you're going to encounter resistance. Some part of us will always be grasping for instant gratification, you know, that voice, I want it now. And these feelings are natural, but when, you know, the conflicts come up, the problem is that we just give up and we don't keep moving forward. But when you can learn how to anticipate resistance and the setbacks and even the failures, you'll be able to acknowledge them and keep moving forward. And I want to share something that I just recently heard, and I had to share it with all of you today because it was so powerful for me. But Nick True is a money and budgeting coach. He has a great YouTube channel called Mapped Out Money, and he's a coach also inside of my Mindful Millionaire program. And he shared something with us last month that I just thought was so awesome. He's been researching buffaloes, and what he found out about buffaloes is so interesting and fascinating and helpful to us, for especially those of us who want to head the other way when the money storms are coming in our direction. And so here's what he found out. Okay. What buffalo do is very unique for the animal kingdom. When storms are coming, most animals will run away from the storm thinking they want to avoid it, right? Which makes sense, but not the buffalo. Instead, they wait for the storm to cross over the crest of the peak of the mountaintop. And as the storm rolls over the ridge, the buffalo turn and charge directly into the storm. How crazy is that? Now, what's happening here, we're going to unpack it. When animals run away from the storm, like a cow, for example, they aren't actually running away from it. It's going to catch up with them most of the time, right? Unless it changes directions. And as a result of that, they'll prolong the experience of moving with the storm because they're going to stay in the storm for much longer. But for the very smart buffalo, they charge into the storm and they're going to get through it faster, even though it's counterintuitive. They have a sense that if you were to watch a parade you want to watch a parade faster, then you walk in the opposite direction of the parade. The buffalo deal with it right away and they get the storm, they get through it faster. And this is what I want you to be thinking about, right? Is when you encounter challenges or you find out something like we just did about what you're dealing with, who do you want to be like? Do you want to be like the buffalo and charge into it and say, I got this, I'm going to figure it out? Do you want to be like the ostrich who puts their head in the sand, right, and hides from it? Or do you want to be like the cow that runs with the storm and it takes longer for it to pass? It is a pivotal decision for many of us to realize that we have the power to change our lives just by thinking about this, because resistance is often the thing that keeps us from solving lots and lots of challenges in our lives. So what I want you to be thinking about today, right, is what happens. And you know, following Rhonda through this was she realized that she had a tendency to avoid the tough conversations. And when she faced her resistance, there was a decision that I'm gonna have a heart-to-heart conversation with my partner. I'm gonna tell him how this makes me feel. I'm gonna tell him about why it's not in alignment with our relationship. I'm going to go into what I'm feeling about where this takes us if we don't start to get on the same page. And by doing that, it brought them into, right, a new level of relationship. But she decided to move into it. And so when we are facing financial anxiety and we find out what's happening for us, like what is it that we're so afraid of, be like the buffalo, mind your resistance, and keep moving forward. Okay, that's number 2. So number 3 is around the doing piece. And this is one of those things that I first and foremost want to say, I've been working with money and helping people for 30 years with their money. And I can't say it enough that doing it the way that I think you want to do it takes time and patience. And so the doing part is the part that probably will take you more time. You can do the feeling right away. We just did it. You can look at your resistance right away and move through it. But taking the action that I want to encourage you to take will be something that you want to give yourself some grace with, right? So what I want you to do right now is I want you to go back to what you were thinking about earlier, that when you got into the feeling sense of what's happening for you. And I want you to think about one thing that you can do differently going forward. Pick just one thing that you are committed to looking into, at the very least, researching. Maybe it's increasing emergency fund, talking to a family member, just like Rhonda did, saving money for a purchase, setting a budget for your holiday spending plan, savings plan. Like, what's one thing that you're pretty darn certain if you do that, you are going to be able to feel less anxious in your life? And so we have another poll that we're going to pull up because we'd love to see what's on your mind. Like, what's something that you want to focus on and that you're committing to in this conversation?
Okay, Lisa, I love that for your last slide. Excuse me, many were like, wait, I can't just pick
Want
one
me to
of
go
those.
back?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Just many were chatting like, oh, I can't pick just one of those. Yes, I need to think about how to create a plan to create more. I need to think about how to do, like that last slide, there are lots. I think people, you're probably finding the same here. We're hoping that you are choosing one of these. Are you someone who decided it was the emergency fund? Or was it talking to a family member or friend? Or developing a spending plan or a budget? Just meditating and understanding what that relationship with money was coming up for you, or is yours something else? I have quite a few that are wanting to pick the combo, Lisa. I need to add, I need to develop a spending plan and budget so that I can increase some of these. Oh, I love that, Anastasia, that says I need to spend more time like exercising or thinking about it, which makes me feel better about my problem. So I think it's that meditator, pay better attention to your feelings, that you have that silent time to do so. Creating some control. Oh, Colleen, I love yours. She said, I need to accept and implement those planning and budget pieces. And someone else who said, I really need to do probably all of these things. Steph, I will tell you, when I first started working with Lisa, I need an all of the above. I never talked about it. I was absolutely an ostrich and not a buffalo. I needed to increase my emergency fund. I needed to pay attention. I never realized that feelings and money were connected. So I'm with you, Steph. I needed an all of the above. All right, another minute here and we can see where we all ended up falling for those of you.
I'm in suspense.
I know. Oh, Amy, that's such a good one. Amy's was, I need to stop comparing myself to others. That paying attention to your feelings and what that brings up is such a good one. Okay, let's see here. Increasing emergency fund and developing a spending plan or budget. We'll add developing / sticking to. Developing a budget, so maybe it increases your talking to friends and family member. I'm surprised that's so little. I think, Lisa, I've done so much work with you that I never would have thought that was important, and have now now had those conversations that I thought weren't necessary, and it has changed more than I had realized. But a lot of meditate. Oh, nice.
Oh, wow, that's so cool. Awesome. So, okay, I'm back on the screen. You can see
Yep,
my,
you're back to good.
okay.
Yep, we're back to increasing emergency fund, talking to, yep,
There we
taking it
go.
bird by bird.
Yeah, bird by bird. Okay, so I'm totally getting it that there's probably more than one. And if you have not read the book, uh, Gary Keller, The One Thing, it's a great book, and you can go read a whole book about what I'm about to say, which is please, please, please just pick one thing. Keep all of the things that are coming up for you on your list, but it is so, so powerful to pick one thing, because what happens for all of us as human beings with jobs and with families and with all the things that we've got going on in our lives, we get overwhelmed. A little different than resistance, but if we get overwhelmed, we're going to go back into resistance. And I want to not have that happen for you. And a great story that many of you may have read is in her book, Bird by Bird. Anne Lamott tells a story of how her older brother, when he was 10 years old, was struggling to write a report on birds. I remember those days. Oh, not pleasant. On the last night before the report was due and nothing to show for it, he was sitting at the kitchen table and surrounded by bird books and almost in tears and totally overwhelmed by the task. And his father sat down next to him and took him in his arms, and he said, "Bird by bird, buddy. Just take it bird by bird." And that's how I want you to be thinking about this. I want you to be so compassionate about your challenges that you are doing this as an action of love, self-love, right? I'm unconditionally loving myself by picking one thing. And when you pick that one thing, you're far more likely to have success with it, right? So you pick one thing and you seal it with success. You get some momentum going. You find out how it feels in your body to not be so stressed about that one thing. And I promise you that if you go through one thing on the other side and you're like, oh my gosh, it worked, I feel so much better, then you will be far better able to tackle the next thing on your list. But you won't get overwhelmed and you won't go back to being the ostrich or the cow, for example. So you know, summarizing with Rhonda's situation, I kind of shared some of this, the fact that opening up to a partner or doing something that she hadn't been willing to do literally changed their whole relationship. How we do one thing in life is how we do everything. And so I found oftentimes that money plays out in our relationships with other people, also with ourselves. And if we can improve this thing that's happening for us, it actually has a ripple in all areas of our lives. And that's what Rhonda saw. And so, you know, our goal today with this conversation was to help you find greater financial happiness. I love this word, eustress, which is like the reduction of stress. It happens when we're feeling, just being willing to feel what's happening for us. Dive a little deeper, meditate about it, figure out what's coming up for you, and then think about how you can move forward like the buffalo, and then ultimately help yourselves do exactly the thing that is going to make the biggest difference in your life. And I cannot say enough about this. I mean, my journey, some of you know this, but I came from a home where my parents fought about money all the time, and it was not easy for me to break this pattern. But I'm hoping that by sharing some of the things that I'm doing in my own life that have completely overhauled. And sometimes it's funny because I have not passed this down to my children in the same way, which is when you know you're doing a good job. And sometimes I'm like, well, you could worry about it a little more than you are. And I'm like, okay, well, that's probably a sign that I am helping my children not carry the burdens of the past. And my legacy going forward is far more positive. So I am so happy we can take questions. And if we have some time, I have another little exercise that we also have available to you on the Grow flyer, but I'm gonna see what's coming up.
Sure. Lisa, I have to say I am overwhelmed with the amount of single moms who joined us today and came with that burden of feeling I'm the single primary parent and now I have to be able to do all of this either kind of newly alone or I've been doing it alone for years and I'm exhausted. And I wanted to see if you could reiterate that one sentence you said at the beginning slide about the data where you said those who feel like they have the least amount of control but the most amount of responsibility, it like causes this coupling with the emotion of the money that just seems to be exacerbating. There's so many that are chatting in thoughts around that.
Yeah, it is really like, even saying what I said, I had to kind of think about it. And it just came to me this morning. I'm doing a TV appearance and they were asking me these questions. I was like, oh, that's the disconnect. Women have not been given the authority. And to be clear, I think a lot of my work is centering, and I think the Mindful Millionaire book is about you learning about giving yourself permission to be the authority around money in your life. Like, I think that there's a thought that someday we're going to adult with money. It's just going to happen. But I've seen that until we actually take a conscious choice in that decision, we keep thinking it's going to come when the money comes. But I think it's better if we give ourselves permission to be the authority of money in our lives. And even though that might seem daunting, and even though that might seem overwhelming at first, you could go back to the three things that we've just gone through. And I just want you to take one step at a time, right? One step at a time. It might be that you take a class, it might be that you read a book, but the point is that you want to feel more empowered with money, and the only person who's going to ever do that for you is you. Does that make sense, Lizzie?
I think it absolutely does. And I think getting to the place, I also want to recommend to many of you that if you haven't seen Lisa's other talks with us, I'm going to join you back on screen since I'm talking more, rather than this voice coming from the like world. I want to just remind everybody that if you have not seen Lisa's others, I think that is a big piece, her other talks with us, a big piece of what Lisa talks about is decoupling all of those feelings she had us go through on the breathing exercises of like, what comes up for you? What do you start to think of? What about, like, how exactly does that scarcity make you feel? What does it make you feel about yourself? What does it make you? So I feel like so many of you who are chatting things in and saying, but I'm a newly single mom and I'm trying to figure this out, or I've been single for a long time, and I'm so glad I mentioned that because now there's a ton of you. I love that someone typed in and said, like, listen, I've now been alone for 10 years and we had $300,000+ of income as a married person, and I've been making it work on much less for a lot of years, and it's been fine. It's been good. But I think it comes with that decoupling the fact that the money has changed with what your core beliefs and values are, and that money doesn't say anything about you. So I want to recommend, Lisa, that we are also reminding people to go back to your other talks with us to sort of talk about that decoupling of if you're in crisis with money, if you're in the red or in a crisis with money, that doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you it doesn't make you less than, it doesn't, all that comparing piece, I feel like is just really manifesting itself in the chat here from people that need that maybe other lesson as well of
Yeah. Well, and I remember because we were working on that talk when we were getting the news about the pandemic. And I think that talk is still just as relevant today as it was, nearly 2 years ago.
Yeah, that's true. It was March of 2020 when we were planning with you to have you in April for like tax time. And it really became about many of us who were busy as ever here at Guaranteed Rate in early April, but our significant others, family members, people weren't working, and it was this, but wait, where am I money wise? And I think that's one of I love that idea about control. What can you do to give yourself permission and authority? And sometimes that's like digging in and figuring out what it really is, what's really going on with the money. Maybe it was okay to only half understand or partly understand. So I think that's a big one. There are a couple, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if there are questions, or we could do a quick other exercise, whatever's best.
I would say let's go through the exercise. We've gotten, again, I would say a lot of the chatter has been around those. And then there are a few of you I'm going to, at the end, Lisa, let's go back to some of the places where you send people for resources. Excuse me again, because there are a few that are saying, what about more specifically, I need to figure out this insurance piece. Like now I'm grown and I'm the one who's responsible for that. Where do I need to go? And I think that you have additional material you've given us on building your financial board that I think we can also direct people back to. So let's do the exercise, I think.
Okay, perfect. So I wasn't sure if we'd have time, but this would kind of be inserted into the second step that we were all doing together. If you wanted to take it deeper and you wanted to find a way to help yourself, because everything that I teach kind of has rabbit holes. So we're going to go down a quick rabbit hole. And that is that if you'd like to also notice some of your patterns and some of your behaviors about what happens when you are feeling not so good about something. And I want to invite you, and this is also on the flyer, so you can totally do this offline and you'll have this quick reference for you. But what you would do, I'll just explain the exercise. You're not going to necessarily do it right this minute. But you're going to get out maybe 2 pieces of paper and you're going to write down like all the things that you do when you're stressed about money. Like whatever comes to mind. Like I go shopping, I go, look like a lot of us, because when we feel bad, right? We want the endorphin shot of endorphins that come when we buy things. So we'll go buy things when we're stressed about money. Like that's an obvious one, but you probably have other things that you do. And what I want you to do is write an exhaustive list of all the things that you notice you do, fight or hide or run away or give up or whatever you do, especially those physical things. And then once you've got that list down, you're going to look at that piece of paper and you're going to separate everything into 2 groups. You're looking for what are the helpful things that I do for myself. Like I go make a healthy smoothie when I'm stressed about money or whatever you do that's uplifting. I go for a walk in nature. And I want you to separate the helpful things from the not such helpful things. And then when you're done with this, I realize there's 3 ones, but when you're done with this, the 3rd step would be use this list to reframe your thinking and what you actually do when you are stressed. Okay, we're trying to modify your behavior to do more of the healthy things. The other one that I hear a lot is, people will eat more than they want when they're really stressed. So that might go on the list that's not so helpful. What we're trying to do is become more aware of our patterns so that we can do the things that are helpful and less of the things that aren't so helpful. How's that, Lizzie?
I think that is great. I'm hoping everyone is busy writing down. I can tell that a few of you who, much like me, are, why, Lisa, do we buy things when we already are having a stress about money? It is a very common, there are lots of people that are feeling the same. I think during the pandemic, I just told someone today, I have officially bought everything in Amazon. There's nothing left in Amazon that I don't need, because whether it was financial stress or otherwise, buying something on Amazon, by the time the box came, I think I was done with my stress, whatever it was like, oh yeah, the amount of things. Oh.
I'm not a biologist, but I do know, you could, meditating helps us notice those shots and what they feel like. That adrenaline rush is a great distraction from not feeling the feeling that we tried to avoid. But what we found out today is if you're never feeling that feeling and you're always finding those other things to do, there's a good chance that you're not actually going to get to the bottom of it and actually change it. And I think that the reason we buy stuff is because there's a fundamental belief inside of us that we can't change the problem.
And we're here today to say you can change the problem. And you absolutely, today was going to be different than all the other days that you've thought about this. And although coming to this 1-hour webinar is not going to get us by, right? One bird at a time, bird by bird, we're not going to be able to solve everything in this 1 hour. But if you leave with that if you can spend some time in these last few minutes, and Lisa, if you'll go back to that, if you don't mind, to the slide with the PDF, for those of you who haven't downloaded, there is a like worksheet that's attached to the webinar here that gets you kind of this activity to just sort of think through. I know for me, mine are spending and eating, right? Like if I'm having a bad day, and if I think about those things, they go back to my childhood. I think when my mom was stressed, or when we got extra ice cream, or we did extra things, or we went somewhere to, so I'm sure that that kind of comes from there, but I have to think about like, what are those other things on that side of the list. I love Lisa, another Lisa had said, true, but then you just create the fiasco of having to return stuff that you bought that you didn't need, that you're now driving to the UPS store to get that. And it's like, yeah, those don't really solve. And if you can take that time to identify that feeling of what could or would I do different, like what would I do different? What's really causing me to go grab extra this or mindlessly shop? Because I think that we've kind of found out, for me, I was an ostrich. I had a couple of people who said, person who said, my spirit animal is a buffalo. I love the analogy of charging the storm. And I was an ostrich. I was willing to like just hope it all got better and I'd wake up after the storm. And so it's I think, again, for so much of your work goes back to breaking that thought process that you have about what money means about you, what it means about your life, what it means about kind of what's going on with your situation. So I think there's quite a few people working on the exercise that are going, maybe I do need to have a few more conversations or get in tune with myself about what that means.
Yeah, I don't think I told you about this, Lizzie, but what I did last night was I brought the financial scorecard that we developed last summer, and I'm giving it to everyone. So those of you who are like, okay, I'm ready to get into the practical stuff and I need to know like what I need to work on, what are the things? So if you go here, I've created a whole bunch of freebies, like a meditation, first chapter of my book, and then also that financial scorecard. So I just wanted to give everyone a very practical tool that will allow you to assess your whole entire financial life on 2 pieces of paper. And then you can see like, oh, it's 1 to 10. So if you're giving yourselves 2s and 3s, those might become priorities if they're important to you.
That's so nice of you. Thank you. That financial scorecard, I'll tell most of you, Ella and I went through the financial scorecard. Mine was an F. I couldn't, there isn't a letter grade, but I had lots of 2s and 3s and things that I felt like I couldn't even answer because I didn't even know enough. I was so ostrich so much of the time that I didn't even know exactly what the answers were. And again, at the end of the day, I chose to share it with Lisa and with Ella, but if I hadn't, I would have still just been very clear, because guess what? There were also some places that I was actually doing all right that I just assumed it was all awful. When your head's under the sand, I assume there were places that I was also doing fine. It was not the end of the world. And I'm young enough. It's not just a facelift, people. I know I'm 70. You think I've been here in this company for 50 years. But I was young enough to be able to, as Lisa said, like, all right, well, if you don't like it, control it and make a change. And I think for a lot of you who are saying the afternoon metro train, going home from the office downtown, I guess people are heading back to the suburbs already. Loud train this afternoon. I'll also say for many of you, Lisa, if the problem is I need to find a way to create more money, I have set out a budget, I have to have these expenses, I have kids, I have a mortgage, I need to keep my home, all of those things. If the answer is I need to create more income, that's an answer, right? I think you've talked about, like, you started this by saying it's not just, this isn't a quick, like, and if I had more money, I wouldn't be stressed. No, you'd be handling more family members and you'd be responsible for more things and you'd have, but really if the answer is I need to create more income, then what? What do you do with that information?
Yeah, it's such a great question to ask yourself, because I think the brain that we don't always use in the way that we can is to create gaps where we write down, this is the thing that I need. This is what's going to, help my life improve. And the cool thing about our brain is that as long as we're willing to say, it's okay that I don't have the answers, it's okay that I don't know how to do this yet, but we set that target, we say how much more money we want. I have found that that we're literally opening possibilities, and our brain will start to try and solve the problem. But many of us don't create the problem because we're afraid what happens if it doesn't work out. But I mean, what I will say to you is, what happens if you don't dream? What happens if you don't set those goals? You probably aren't going to get where you want to go. So a lot of my work is around inviting that conversation, for you to have that conversation with yourself. I want more money. And then start to do the same kind of exercise that we did before, where you're writing a list of like 50 ways or 100 ways that you could bring more money into your life. And the reason we write a whole bunch down is some of them are going to be crazy, but a few of them you're going to be like, wait a minute, there's an asset that I have that I didn't even know about. Or, you know, it may involve the work that you do now. It may involve something that you, do on the side. I work with tons of people who have full-time jobs and are also starting businesses on the side because they're excited about a hobby or something that they want to do more, pay more attention to, and potentially build a nest egg from that money that they create from a side hustle. There's so many possibilities. The problem is we don't allow ourselves to dream about what those might look like.
And opening them up and getting in touch with what that really was I really, at the end of the day, what will help is creating more revenue to take care of the things I need, but not naming the problem will keep you in that place. So Leisa, I want you to just, if you can close up with us to remind everyone, the Mindful Millionaire, I think we can find on Amazon, right? I think we ordered them from Amazon in the past. Perfect. And so there's one way, Mindful Millionaire. If you're thinking, I'm stressing about holiday money, I can't think of being a millionaire, Leisa walks you through that. It'll start to get your head right. It doesn't start with being a millionaire, and it won't end likely by, in a month of being a millionaire, but there's that thought process. And then the other ways, I know that we have followed you on social. There are ways to kind of get involved. You do clinics and kind of camps, things where people can get together and talk a little bit more about this when you need to have an additional discussion about money. You have some additional places where people can find you, right?
Yes, definitely. We're going to be doing some cool workshops in December. So if you go to wealthclinic.com/vision, you'll be notified about things. So there's some free workshops that will extend on this conversation in December. We're going to do a month of meditating together. If anybody, that sounds exciting. It's called Infinite Abundance. So we're just now planning that, and that will go a couple weeks in December and the first 2 weeks of January. So there's some things that we're planning that it's just so fun to be around people who are willing to have these conversations that most people don't want to have. And I have found that, like, my net worth, even though I don't make as much money as when I was a mortgage banker in the job that I do right now, what I will say is that my net worth has more than doubled by just talking about money and thinking about money more, and how I can help myself actually has paid off in big ways. So it's not like it can actually be a little more magical than I even give it credit for, because what we pay attention to in life grows. Just remember that what we pay attention to grows. If we pay attention to our financial anxiety, it grows. If we pay attention to our money in healthy ways, it grows.
I love it. I think that's the best thing to end on. What you pay attention to grows. If you want it to be scarcity, that gap will grow. If you will focus on the other, that will grow as well. So thank you again so much, Leisa. I'm going to remind all of you, rate.com/grow has Leisa 2 other times than today's talk. Again, last year in April, we met with her and talked about your relationship with money and your emotion piece of that. And then the second time we talked to her was building a panel. So for those of you who asked me a question about, but what about retirement savings? What about that actual specific stuff? Leisa gave some great tips that were incredibly actionable. I used all of them, and I'm still working through my list of building that group to be able to actually get referrals. And how do you get referrals and still vet them? So please go back and take a look at that one as well from earlier this year. Leisa, thank you again so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining and investing this hour in helping you reduce your anxiety around money. Thanks all.